Good afternoon and welcome to the Hoehl Gallery here in the Larner College of Medicine. What a tremendous turnout today. I was going to start my remarks by sort of making an offhanded comment about canceling elective surgeries today, and then I actually heard that has happened because of your interest here today. So we'll be efficient nonetheless. Thank you for being a part of one of the University of Vermont's most revered traditions, the Endowed Faculty Investiture Ceremony. I'm Shane Jacobson, and I'm honored to serve as the President and CEO of the University of Vermont Foundation. Today we have the pleasure of recognizing and celebrating an outstanding member of our faculty. In just a few moments, Professor Robert Williams will be formally invested as the inaugural Chris Abajian, MD, 69, and Margaret Abajian, Green and Gold Professor in Pediatric Anesthesiology. We are privileged to have a number of special guests joining us here to mark this special occasion, including members of the Abajian family and their friends, Interim Provost and Senior Vice President of UVM, Patty Prelock, and faculty, staff, students, and leaders from across the Department of Anesthesiology, across the Larner College of Medicine, and the UVM Medical Center. Welcome. Before we go any farther, let us take a moment to express our deep gratitude to the donors, a group of donors whose extraordinary generosity has made the Abajian Green and Gold Professorship possible. This endowment has been funded through the generosity of faculty and staff in the Department of Anesthesiology, as well as through the generous investments made by family and friends of Chris and Margaret. Thank you. Certainly without you, we would not be here today. It has been now over 5 years since the University of Vermont and the UVM Foundation started the tradition of paying special tribute to the outstanding scholars, researchers, teachers who have served as professors and chairs on this campus for many years. And in today's ceremony, we again recognize one of our own. We are fortunate that today's ceremony allows us to celebrate an esteemed faculty member, Professor Robert Williams. In doing so, we embrace the symbolic tradition dating back to the Middle Ages, when early European universities honored their scholars with elaborate rites of investiture. At UVM, these ceremonies acknowledge and highlight the stature of the newly endowed positions and celebrate the significant accomplishments and promising future of the recipients. Later, Professor Williams, today's guest of honor, will be presented with a medallion that marks this occasion and signifies his status as the holder of an endowed faculty position. We hope he will wear this medallion with his academic regalia at commencement and other university functions. As I often like to add in these ceremonies, you can wear it every day of the week if you want. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce UVM President Tom Sullivan, who has successfully championed our Move Mountains campaign and our goal to significantly increase the number of endowed faculty, professors, and chairs here at the University of Vermont. And let me go off script because this is a special one. This actually marks Tom's last investiture ceremony as president. And I think, again, you all know how committed the president has been to investment in our faculty, in particular endowed professorships and chairs. And he'll talk about it in a moment, but under his leadership, we have doubled the number of endowed positions on campus during this campaign. And it's marked as even more significant since not only is this the president's last investiture ceremony, it happens to be Dr. Rick Page's first ceremony as Dean of the Larner College of Medicine. So to both of you, we're excited to have you as part of this program today. Please join me in welcoming President Sullivan.
Thank you, Shane. Rick, I guess we call that transitions. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome on this beautiful summer. I'm glad to say summer afternoon. We finally got here. And what a happy occasion it is, as Shane just mentioned, the word went out earlier that all elective surgeries were to stop on campus at 4 o'clock so that you could all be here. And look around. This has to be the safest place in Vermont right now with all of these fabulous doctors and nurses and staff, everybody here to congratulate Rob and Chris. And of course, that's why we're here, to congratulate Dr. Rob Williams in his investiture today, Chris, Margaret, for your spectacular leadership, support, and we honor both of you through this endowed professorship. We also recognize and honor this afternoon, importantly, I want to mention, Pediatrics and Anesthesiology, because of course in these two spectacular physicians, we honor and celebrate pediatric anesthesiology. And to our surgeon friends who are around the room everywhere, I think it's pretty true that without those anesthesiologists, you'd all be spending more time off. So we are recognizing pediatrics, anesthesiology, surgery, that combination of great talent at UVM and at our medical center. That's what this investiture is all about, in the person of Dr. Rob Williams, and in the namesake that we honor also Chris and Margaret today. Very special afternoon. Shane said that great universities have venerable opportunities and practices to recognize the most distinguished faculty on their campus through endowed professorships and endowed chairs. And we are grateful at UVM that we've had the occasion very frequently to do that. As Shane said, just 7 years ago, when we started the comprehensive campaign 7.5 years ago, we had 52 of these very revered, coveted positions. And today we announce this is the 120th. By my math, Shane, that's a bit better than double. Thank you all. We thank our donors and our friends that made all of this possible. It's really not about the dollars or the money. It's about the opportunity through those contributions that we are able to recognize and to celebrate the distinguished work of our great faculty at the University of Vermont, and today, here at the medical school, the Larner Medical School, and our medical center, by honoring Rob and Chris and Margaret as well. It is a great venerable tradition, and it also shows that UVM is in that league, where we can go out and ask donors and friends and alums to help us recognize, because it not only helps the great research and scholarship and teaching and mentoring that takes place here, but it also helps recruit and retain great faculty like we recognize today in Rob and Chris and all of their colleagues who are here. The great faculty, the pediatricians, the surgeons, and the anesthesiologists, and all the team effort that takes place in the Larner College of Medicine and in our great medical center as well. And that includes our terrific cancer center also. I want to particularly thank Chris and Margaret for their dedication to pediatric anesthesiology and all of the support around that. Nationally renowned individual. Rob Williams steps into those shoes, and I know Chris was a mentor as well as an advisor. We like to say at these events, I know Shane, I say it often, I believe it, this is what the UVM family is about. Celebrating, recognizing, and rewarding the very best talent that this university has. So this afternoon, we congratulate wholeheartedly Chris, Margaret, Rob. Fabulous work on behalf of children, pediatric anesthesiology, the surgeons, saving lives every day, particularly in this case for young people. Congratulations.
Well, President Sullivan, I am excited to be part of my first investiture. I held an endowed chair a couple times already, and I never got an investiture. I never got a medal, as in many things that I could make note of in my time since arriving here at the University of Vermont, the Larner College of Medicine. People know how to do things right here. And it's really a pleasure to be a part of this. And talk about transitions, I can't help myself but ask for one more round of applause for our departing but never forgotten president of this university, Tom Sullivan. Now, I can't be more proud than to be a colleague of Dr. Williams and having the opportunity to participate in honoring Chris and Margaret Abajian as we celebrate this investiture of the first green and gold professorship in pediatric anesthesiology. Dr. Williams is a nationally recognized expert in pediatric anesthesiology, but this expertise is only one of many characteristics that qualify him for this honor and this very cool medal. First and foremost, Dr. Williams is a quintessential physician scientist. His research is grounded in the experiences of his patients and his desire to make those experiences better. While his clinical care here at the UVM Medical Center is focused on achieving the best possible outcomes for individual patients, his research and his advocacy strive to help improve outcomes for infants and children around the world. Dr. Williams' primary research interest is the safety of anesthesia in children, particularly the controversy concerning potential damage to the young brain of anesthetic agents. His work comparing the development of the brain and brain function outcomes for children receiving spinal anesthesia compared with those receiving general anesthesia has been highly influential and is widely recognized. With cooperation from the Vermont Agency on Education, Dr. Williams is conducting additional outcomes research on patients who receive anesthesia at an early age. The results of this research will in no doubt advance the discussion around the impact of administering general anesthetic to children. It's important to note that this area of study and expertise have been heavily influenced by Dr. Abajian's enduring interest in the use and study of spinal anesthesia rather than general anesthesia in infants. Dr. Williams' work draws significantly on data collected in the Vermont Infant Spinal Registry, a resource started by Dr. Abajian that now holds valuable data on over 2,000 patients. Recently, Dr. Williams has also become a leader in trying to better understand the neurological effects of anesthesia by collecting EEG recordings of these little babies during their operating room care. The preliminary data he has collected show promise, and we're eager to learn more of his research and the research of those he mentors as this research continues. Alongside and intertwined with his clinical duties and research agenda, Dr. Williams also has a busy teaching schedule. At the bedside, in the classroom, he's proven himself a dedicated and capable teacher and mentor who's fully committed to teaching our medical students and resident physicians how to provide safe and effective anesthesia care. Moreover, to his peers around the world, many of whom he's welcomed right here to visit UVM, he's seen as a premier practitioner and consultant of national and international prominence. Dr. Williams also participates in many aspects of clinical and institutional public service. At the University of Vermont, he served for many years as co-director and then director of the Division of Pediatric Anesthesia. For over 20 years, he's co-directed Vermont Perspectives in Anesthesia, a continuing medical education course that draws physicians, nurses, and students from across the country. Just recently, he's been named director of the Department of Anesthesia's Research Committee, which will allow him to use his vast experience to support faculty, residents, and students as they pursue research and other scholarly activities within the Department of Anesthesia. As a peer reviewer for 3 influential scholarly journals, Dr. Williams is particularly well suited to this role in research. Finally, in the community, Dr. Williams is a key advocate and leader in the promotion of helmet use in outdoor sports. Parenthetically, I had a son who was a pole vaulter, and golly, I wish he'd talk to you about wearing a helmet. Did okay, but thanks to the public health work that you've overseen, Dr. Williams, there is now much greater awareness of the risks of traumatic head injury, both in Vermont and throughout the country. In everything he does, Dr. Williams demonstrates his commitment to improving quality of care for our patients. And for years to come, the people of our region will be grateful to have a physician of Dr. Williams' curiosity, intellect, expertise, and compassion here in the state of Vermont. Now, Professor Williams, would you please come forward? And as I have learned, I get to read the citation as you are invested in this great honor. The citation reads, Dr. Robert Williams is a highly respected researcher, clinician, teacher, and scholar. He has dedicated his career to helping improve the lives of patients and families who face complex and challenging journeys. Through his research, teaching, and leadership, he is ensuring that we are constantly improving our ability to meet the medical needs of children here in Vermont and around the world. His work has brought great distinction to the Robert Larner, MD, College of Medicine, and the University of Vermont. Dr. Robert Williams, the inaugural Chris and Margaret Abajian Green and Gold Professor in Pediatric Anesthesiology, we honor you today with this medallion, which serves as an enduring symbol of the excellence that you strive to achieve in all aspects of your professional life. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dean Page and Presidents Jacobson and Sullivan and the UVM Foundation and all the folks who made this wonderful tribute to Chris and Margaret possible. I will say that I usually prefer to just speak from the heart and off the cuff, but I had the worry that this might be a little emotional, so I wrote from the heart, but I wrote it down. So I also want to say special thanks to all the donors, including colleagues past and present who are here. I want you all to know I appreciate the grassroots aspect of the fundraising for this particular professorship. I pledge to be a responsible steward of the Chris and Margaret Abajian Green and Gold Professorship. My primary goal will be to develop and grow this fund so that it becomes self-sustaining and contributes to the care of pediatric patients receiving anesthesia care for many years into the future. Your contributions will serve just as a starting point for this mission. I want to take a moment for a special thank you on behalf of members of the entire anesthesia family to Margaret Abajian. For over 3 decades, Margaret graciously opened her heart and her home to members of the Department of Anesthesia for journal clubs, summer picnics, and other get-togethers. We talk a lot about the unique family feel of both UVM and specifically the Department of Anesthesia. That family aspect has got us through thick and thin over the years. As someone who was welcomed into this family, I can tell you it's a real thing, and Margaret is a cornerstone of that family. I'd like to share some examples with you of how Dr. Abajian has influenced my professional life, as well as the impact he has made on anesthesia care for children around the world. I was only an accidental anesthesiologist, to be honest. I originally trained at UVM as a pediatric resident in the 1980s. And it's very important to me to see some of the folks who trained me here. That's awesome. During that time, pediatric critical care was not a thing, and there was no pediatric ICU here. After some emotional and, unfortunately futile cases of trying to provide advanced pediatric critical care in the Baird 5 treatment room, I made it my goal to start a PICU at UVM. Anesthesia training seemed like the ideal background for this. So after serving in the Marshall Islands with the National Service Corps, I returned to UVM to start an anesthesia residency. While I was waiting to start my anesthesia residency, Dr. Lucy asked me if I could help out as a neonatal fellow in the NICU for a few months. And that was when I first met Chris.
I was not a resident yet in anesthesia. To be honest, I never did a day of anesthesia in my life as a medical student. I had no idea what I was getting into. But I diagnosed an infant with a patent ductus arteriosus. I'm not very good at physical exam, to be honest. So I was very proud of myself for this and thought I would follow the baby to the operating room to see the anesthesia and the surgery. When I got to the operating room, I met Chris. And I learned he was planning on doing a spinal anesthetic for that baby. I was stupefied. I didn't know anything about anesthesia, believe me, right? But even I knew that heart surgery required general anesthesia. I expected my patient would be intubated, and I would be managing the infant on a ventilator post-op. Even I knew that spinal anesthesia just wasn't a possibility, right? Fortunately, Chris didn't know that to be true. He successfully performed a spinal anesthetic on that baby, avoiding all the concerns that pediatric anesthesiologists then, and maybe even more now, share about general anesthesia in young children. That was the first time I saw Chris work his magic, but fortunately for me, it was not the last. You know, if I were to write a book for young anesthesiologists, I think I'd riff a title that's in the popular press, and I would call it, Everything I Needed to Learn, I Learned from Chris Abajian. It would be a short book with only 2 chapters, but it would stand the test of time because while technology and medicine necessarily evolve over time, basic principles do not. The first chapter would be, do the right thing for your patient, even if it requires a different approach and extra work on your part. Stand your ground and stick to this principle. And that was what Chris taught us. It was this thinking that led Chris to do a spinal anesthetic for a child needing heart surgery. And you know, the anesthesia community was initially skeptical of Chris's work. But the landmark publication of his work has literally changed the world of pediatric anesthesia and influenced the care of tens of thousands of children worldwide. You know, by sticking to this principle at UVM of doing the right thing, we performed nearly 3,000 anesthetics in young infants. That's 3,000 babies who have not needed to be exposed to general anesthesia drugs, who have not needed to have their airway manipulated with all the mischief that can go along with that. To this day, the University of Vermont has the richest experience in awake regional anesthesia in the world, and we remain the thought leader in this field, all due to Chris. The second chapter of this book would be simply remain humble. Performing anesthesia, particularly pediatric anesthesia, requires an odd mixture of hubris, ego, and caution. Chris has the recipe for this mixture just about right. Chris had a reputation for good hands at performing all kinds of procedures. I see Dr. Shapiro is here today. And I can remember Howard, I was still a resident, and there was a particularly challenging infant to be intubated. One of these ones that people knew for days was going to be a big deal. And Chris did it. I can call Dr. Shapiro witnessing that intubation and telling Chris, you're still my hero. I don't know if you remember that quote, right? You're still my hero. And that's how we all thought of Chris, as our hero. For my part, however, the most important aspect of Chris's teaching was the second chapter, stay humble in the face of universal praise. I recall praising Chris after another difficult intubation. His response to me was to turn and say, there are thousands of patients I can't intubate. I just pray they don't come into my operating room every day. That's perfect. And Chris, you should know that I've repeated this anecdote to countless anesthesia residents over the years in the hope that they will abide by this principle. Although my experience as an anesthesia resident with Chris convinced me about the wonders of regional anesthesia in children, it was my experience as a pediatric intensivist that made me passionate about getting the word out about these techniques. When I would receive a patient from Chris in the PICU that Chris had taken care of, they simply looked better than if they had general anesthesia, better than anything I could do with general anesthesia or anybody else. It was remarkable and well worth sharing. I wish I had a way to quantify to everybody here what I mean by they looked better. I just don't have a way of saying that other than to express it emotionally. Perhaps with the resources of this professorship, we'll be able to look a little more into this and try and understand in a quantitative way why that's true, Chris. Spinal anesthesia in infants is a wonderful technique and is finally being recognized by the greater community. However, even in medicine, change seems to occur excruciatingly slowly. In 1909, Lord Tyrrell Gray stated in The Lancet that he was, quote, convinced that spinal anesthesia will occupy an important part of surgery for children of the future. I believe that due to Chris, that future has finally arrived, if only a century later than Dr. Gray may have envisioned. You know, spinal anesthesia in children only requires a small amount of generic anesthesia, and it's incredibly cheap and efficient. However, as a result of this, there's been no pharmaceutical or medical industry to help promote this technique along the way. My hope is to use the Abajian professorship as a platform to level the playing field and advocate for Chris's techniques and to promote research into quantifying the benefits of regional anesthesia in the world. So all you folks who've helped with this and Chris's work and our advocacy, you know, that's how we're responding to the lack of big pharma here. So we're going to do it. I have personal experience and interest in healthcare in the developing world, where exposure to general anesthesia is much, much more problematic than elsewhere. In these settings, the safety and cheapness of spinal anesthesia for infants is even more attractive. I hope a major aspect of my work with this professorship, and maybe the way I can put a small imprimatur of my own on this, on Chris's work, is to promote and expand the use of spinal anesthesia in all parts of the world. So, thank you again for the incredible honor of allowing me to carry on the work of Chris and Margaret.
Thank you, Dr. Williams, and congratulations. Let me add, as I've had the pleasure of meeting many, many faculty now who've received these medallions and been part of these investiture ceremonies, you stand out as the first whom I met, and the first thing out of his mouth was, I want to get out and do fundraising. This makes me want to go talk to people about what we do and why it matters. So development team, we've got one right here. So thank you once again. Please join me now in welcoming to the podium Donald Matthews, the chair of the Department of Anesthesiology.
Thank you. And whoever put this program together, I'm a little annoyed that I have to follow Rob with that speech. That was pretty amazing. First, I'd like to thank the University of Vermont President Tom Sullivan, Interim Provost Patty Prelock, Larner College Dean Rick Page, sorry. I had to look at my note to remember. And our president, UVM President and Foundation CEO Shane Jacobson. Thank you. Today we celebrate a very historic day for the Department of Anesthesiology. For the past 2 years, I've had the privilege of serving as the chair of this distinguished group of faculty anesthesiologists, certified registered nurse anesthetist, certified anesthesia assistants, resident physicians, and administrative assistants, and other support personnel. Together, we have cared for patients here in Vermont at this hospital and with its College of Medicine for 80 years as a department. For 73 of those 80 years, this department was led by one of 3 chairmen, John Abajian, Chris's father and the founding chair of the department, John Mazuzin, who built the department into a clinical powerhouse, including recruiting Chris Abajian to the department as the first specialty trained anesthesiologist, and Howard Shapiro, who is here today, who led the transition of the group from an academically oriented private practice to a true academic department with excellence in clinical care, education, and research, and who also fully integrated the department into the Larner College of Medicine. We would not be the department we are today without the stalwart leadership of these physicians. As I took the role of chair, I did notice that we were the sole department in the College of Medicine that did not have an endowed professorship. In an attempt to address this, I invited Chris and Margaret out to lunch to tell them that the department intended to establish an endowed professorship in their name. I have to say that in their modesty and humility, I had to twist both their arms pretty hard to get them to agree. We did not get to yes until I pointed out that establishing this professorship would not only honor them, but would also help the department. We are here today because of the efforts and generosity of a lot of people, the UVM Medical Center Larner College of Medicine Development Office and the UVM Foundation have been instrumental. Ben Yausi Hines began the project with us, thank you Ben, and then handed it off to Kevin McAteer and Frank Idelman, who worked tirelessly to help us do this. I need to thank multiple very generous donor members from the anesthesiology department, as well as other physicians from the medical center who contributed. The Abajian family and friends also helped significantly, and I would like to specifically thank Peter and Margie Stern and Alan Levine, dear friends of the Abajians who helped make this happen. And thank you also to Steve Leffler, who's in the back, who was the person who green-lighted us stopping the operating room today at 4 o'clock so we could all be here. So thank you very much, Steve. And I would be remiss if I did not note that our fundraising for this endowment will continue, and we are very welcome to receive additional support for the project for anyone here who feels so inclined. As you know, we are here to honor three very special people, Chris and Margaret Abajian and Rob Williams. Chris Abajian is truly a giant in the field of pediatric anesthesiology. In his wonderful book, Anesthesia at the House, our department historian, Joe Kreutz, devoted 2 full pages to Chris Abajian, calling him the Magic Man. He gave him that moniker partly as a reference to Chris's ability to charm and beguile frightened children in the OR with his magic tricks, with his patter, and with his sleight of hand. Long before other modern distractions such as iPads and child life specialists, Chris found a way to make the OR experience more pleasant for children and their families. His true magic, however, was through his pioneering work with infant spinal anesthesia, which you've heard about now. He demonstrated to the world how effective and useful this technique could be. This information continues to improve the care of infants and children worldwide who are increasingly being cared for in a way that spares them a general anesthetic during a time of neurodevelopment. In 2013, in recognition of Chris's contribution to pediatric care, the American Academy of Pediatrics awarded Chris the prestigious Robert M. Smith Award. Now, Rob Williams is truly the clinical and intellectual heir of Chris and his work, so it's quite fitting that he is invested today as the first Abajian professor of pediatric anesthesiology. Rob has inherited Chris's passion for spinal anesthesia and continues to proselytize and shout from the mountaintops about its benefits. More than just an advocate, however, Rob has furthered the scientific knowledge in this area. These accomplishments have been well described by Dean Page, so I will let his comments reflect on how much I respect Rob and all that he has done for the department. My final remarks are reserved for Margaret, Chris's partner, and all that he has accomplished. When I first broached the plan to name this professorship for both of them, Margaret characteristically said, "Me? What did I do?" Well, Margaret was with Chris every step of the way, moving from London to Toronto to Vermont and raising their family, sons Michael and David, welcoming innumerable guests to their home for dinner and hosting the department's annual summer picnic for many, many years at their lake house. Those summer parties were very important to the department and its well-being. And together, she and Chris founded a company called Huggable Scrubs, which produced surgical scrubs depicting cartoon characters. Margaret ran this successful business for many years, bringing joy to children worldwide. I want to conclude today, again, by thanking you all for being here. I believe that Rob and I are to present a medallion to, if I have the timing right here, let me check, that's correct, a medallion to Chris. So Rob, would you join me in? It says Chris Abajian, MD, and Margaret Abajian, Green and Gold Professorship in Pediatric Anesthesiology. Now I would like to invite Chris's friend Peter Stern to come forward for his remarks. So Peter, Dr. Peter Stern.
Thank you. I guess one of the things when you're the last one is some of your comments have already been made. It's an honor to be here today to celebrate the establishment of a research endowment in the name of Chris and Margaret Abajian. I would also like to recognize the significance of it being in the Abajian name. John Abajian, Chris and Michael's father, established a division of anesthesia in Burlington in the early 1940s. Because of John's inquisitive mind and challenging spirit, he attracted physicians from all over the world who contributed to the advancement and improvement of healthcare and anesthesia delivery long before there was an endowment to fund research. The contributions during John's leadership included the creation of the Abajian scale, which established a method of delivering halothane, one of the first non-explosive inhalation agents, in a both safe and regulated manner. Other contributions include early work on oximetry, now a standard of care, measuring end-tidal CO2, also a standard of care, and many other achievements. As for Chris and Margaret, I first met Chris approximately 66 years ago, and Margaret 48 years ago. As I look back and think of the experiences we have had together, it's like a fine wine. Age has let me look back and recognize all that he has taught me. Among those lessons is Chris sees things others don't and is calm under fire. As an example, in the winter of 1953, Chris and his family were at our home in Stowe for our annual New Year's celebration. While the adults were downstairs doing adult things, drinking, Chris, his brothers Michael and Greg, myself, my brother, were upstairs doing what 10-year-olds and younger do, creative destruction. Up went a target against one wall, followed by an avalanche of arrows from across the room. By the end of the evening, the flowered wallpaper was somewhat holy. I was clearly concerned about my parents' discovery of our interior decorating ventures. However, Chris, in his calm and creative way, went to the bathroom, returned with a yellow bar of Dial soap, and plugged the holes, never to be discovered by my parents. Later, I came to know Chris as a roommate, then a flatmate in London, then a husband, then father, and finally my teacher of anesthesia, a challenge in itself. His teaching involved much more than academics. He was a role model for patient care, for working with surgeons, an art in itself, and empathy. The joy he got from practicing medicine, I believe, was greatest from the relationships he developed with patients and families. In addition, he had an interest in improving anesthetic care. Chris established what is now thought of as routine: spinal anesthesia for newborn and high-risk infants. It cannot be overstated the influence Chris has had as a mentor to many a resident who followed him into the specialty of pediatric anesthesia. At this time, I would like to put on another hat and disrobe. You're wondering why I wasn't wearing a jacket.
Oh, there we go.
Chris is always continues to look for ways to comfort and reassure patients. And he and Margaret created Huggable Scrubs. With this, they introduced a friendly face to the OR and challenged tradition. Not all hospital ORs were up for scrubs that were other than a solid color. Then came the magic bug. He entertained many, a child and parent. He carried the practice on beyond his clinical years. There are many other lessons he has taught me over the 66 years. However, this is not the time or place to reveal them. Let's look at Margaret. I met Margaret in London in 1971, where we were flatmates. I saw her passion for nursing at both the Hammersmith Hospital and Chelsea Women's Hospital. As a flatmate, I experienced firsthand her Australian hospitality. She was always welcoming friends and strangers to our flat, not to mention looking out for me. When Margie and I moved to Burlington, we saw the care she put into raising Michael, John, and David. In addition, she took on the challenge of working with Chris in creating Huggable Scrubs in design, manufacturing, and sales. She was there for Chris for the annual anesthesia summer parties, all of those great dinners for friends, anesthesia residents, associates, and others. They are a team. Thank you. At this
I just want to thank you all for the wonderful honor that you have given me. And I want to say that we wouldn't be here today if it hadn't have been for Dr. Mellish, whose son is in the audience today, because he came down to the operating room and he said he had a little baby up in the NICU that had a big hernia. And in the same breath, he said, and it's too big to do under local anesthesia. So I said, what do you want me to do? He said, why don't you give him a spinal? I said, a spinal? And then he threw down the gauntlet. He said, your father has done it. And in looking back through the literature, I found the paper in 1909 where they had babies under a year of age, but they didn't have intensive care nurseries. And my father happened to be in Puerto Rico at the time, walking the beaches, so I asked his colleague, what was the usual dose of tetracaine that they did. And he said, we usually give them 1 milligram of tetracaine per year of age. So the next hurdle was I'd done a lot of spinals, but never in a little tiny baby. So I asked his partner, or not his partner, I asked a head nurse in the NICU to come down and talk me through it. So she did. She held the baby, and I gave him a spinal. And to this day, I know Rob done all this work, and I could have told him after I looked at this baby, it was going to be normal, you know. So I just can't thank everybody enough for this honor, and I'd like to shoot you for suggesting it.
Sorry, Chris.
But I can't say anymore. Just so that you all know, it wasn't my idea. If it had been my idea, then I would deserve this honor. But it wasn't my idea. It was Nick Mellish's father.
Yes. Let's say hi to everybody in the room. Okay. We can get you back to your chair. Head back to your chair.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Hero sounds about right, though, I would say, doesn't it? And thank you for your remarks, Dr. Stern. You mentioned that going last, we've all said what you were going to say. I was going to do the take off the shirt for the first time for effect, and you took it from me. So now we'll keep it there. But very memorable, and thank you so much for everyone in the platform party today. And as we reach the end of our program, I want to thank again all of you for joining us here today, many of you breaking from your daily tasks and work to be here. President Sullivan mentioned it in his remarks, Rick mentioned it in his, and it was clear throughout, UVM family. This feels like family. There were laughters and tears and joy and stories, and it's a special family, isn't it? We all take, again, great pride in recognizing the faculty and our staff, our researchers, our clinicians for the work you do each and every day. And today we recognize Chris and many others. If you're a member of the UVM Medical Center, Larner College of Medicine, if you would please stand to be recognized or raise your hand. I think, again, today as part of the UVM family, you do such tremendous work in this community. We owe it to you to say thank you as well.
To say that if it hadn't have been for the surgeons, the nurses in the recovery room, in the operating room, up in the NICU, it wouldn't have happened. You're all my second family, every one of you. One last comment. Dr. Brown, who took over for Dr. Mellish, I did 3 spinals for him, his first 3 cases. he looked up over the anesthesia screen and said, "I'm going to make you famous."
Thank you all once again, and in closing, again, President Sullivan, congratulations, job well done, and Rick, one of many, many more to come, I am sure. For those of you who were part of the program today, if you could please step forward, we'll take a few photos and let everyone else get started on some food and dessert. Thank you all very much.